All right, so today I want to talk about keep planting seeds. It's kind of an inspiration I got from one of the, uh, I was reading recently, our True Mother's memoir, and there was a part in there that kind of got me thinking about a lot of other things that are happening in my life and in the community right now. Just wanted to share a little bit about that. I'd like to start off by reading an excerpt from what I was reading there. In 1975, we held mission conferences in Japan and America, from which we selected young missionaries and dispatched them to some 95 new nations, in addition to the more than 30 already with active missions. There were so many reasons to delay or slow down our evangelical outreach, but we could feel God's urgency and pressed forward. I recall my husband's words, shared late one evening. There will always be reasons that we cannot send them. But if we do not send them now, we will never send them. There will never be a moment without difficulties. Let us make a firm decision when things seem the most difficult. So we have to understand that the context of this situation is that for most of the history of our movement internationally, we've been very poor. And arguably, things haven't changed too much. But especially in those days, to send missionaries to other countries, it was so difficult, and there was no money for it. So it was really a big sacrifice, and it was really a question of should we? Because, you could invest money into self-growth, right? Like you have a business, and instead of, rapidly expanding, one could say that it might be more valuable to build a stronger base and foundation where you started. But they really felt at that time that it was necessary, even though circumstances weren't the best, they felt it was necessary to send those missionaries to all those countries. And the thing that really got me about this was where our True Father was saying, there will always be reasons we cannot send them. If we do not send them now, we never will send them. There will never be a moment without difficulties. I feel like that's obviously pertaining to this particular situation, but I think we often find ourselves in that kind of a dilemma in life too, where there's something that is really important to us or something we really want, maybe something we want to change or something we want to develop, but we hesitate because circumstances are not ideal. There's some reason, or many reasons, why it's not a good time. We could do it later. Maybe when things are more ideal or when things are more safe. I was thinking a lot about this in terms of this year, because in a lot of ways, this year has been very wild. It's been very up and down. There's been a lot of changes. There's been a lot of discomfort. And even though I'm very encouraged, for example, with our decision to buy a new parsonage and make the old parsonage into the young adult house and all these things. And all those things happened, and it's very humbling and it's very inspiring, and it makes me feel like, wow, like God even cares about our little plans, our small, short-sighted, small-minded plans. Even God, help us with those things. It's inspiring in a lot of ways. But at the same time, that put us in a very uncomfortable situation where we used up almost all of our savings. And, the reality is these days expenses are up, tithing is down, and we are, even still, but besides all that, we're still moving forward with our exterior renovation plans. And as Adonia pointed out, we made those plans 5 years ago. And those plans kind of feel like, wow, are we ever going to do them? So I think that was part of the reason why I felt, like, wow, if we don't start making progress on this, we might as well just throw away the plan, because after 5 years, if you don't make any progress, what's the point? But I had to remind myself that even though I question sometimes, like, did we make a mistake? Was this the right thing to do? All these things that we did, and trying to move forward with our renovation plans, but also any other plans that we have. There's a part of me that wonders, maybe it would be better, safer to hold back. Maybe we should slow down. Maybe we should play it safe, try to get into a more comfortable situation where we've grown our savings, or we are less busy with other things. And I've had to remind myself that God is not a short-sighted God. God's not going to show up for us in our life, answer prayers, fulfill promises, and then just drop us later on. God is not so short-sighted or as simple as we sometimes fear that he is. This reminds me of, this is a quote from our true father where he talked a little bit about this. God has been striving endlessly to save humankind through his providence. Even though we human beings are fallen, he does not abandon us. Although we fell prey to sin and evil, who is it that rescues us, lives for us, and endeavors to guide us to the land of blessing? It is not our own parents. It is not our spouse or our children, even though they love us. It is not our nation, nor is it any of the saints and sages. It is none other than God. And this is from Deuteronomy. So be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid and do not panic before them, for the Lord your God will personally go ahead of you. He will neither fail you nor abandon you. So, this fear or this desire to try to play it safe is very much a part of the way I've lived my life, a lot of my life, just to be honest with you. I don't know if it's an aspect of my character or learned behavior, or I don't know what it is, but I tend to like to play it safe personally. I like to make sure that we have adequate savings in our bank accounts. I like to make sure that we're spending less than we're making. I like to make sure that we don't run out of milk and necessities in the fridge. It gets a little extreme sometimes. I'll end up running to the grocery store like 4 or 5 times because we have 3 teenagers essentially in the house, and they're literally just eating. You buy a bag of apples and they're just gone the next day. Like it just doesn't matter. And I find myself going out to the store often just to make sure we don't run out of certain things. Maybe too much. Because there's something there. Sometimes we have too much stuff. Yes, Adonia is quick to point that out. And this may be a little bit less relevant of a point, but even when I was younger and I played a lot of video games, I used to play this game StarCraft a lot, and all right. So in this game. It's kind of like a real-time, like you build bases and you try to build an army and you try to fight the bad guys and all this stuff. And the way I would play is I would try to build this impenetrable defense and get all the resources, and then from a position of complete safety and impenetrable defense, and I would build up my armies and I would go destroy the other player, right? And that's kind of how I would play the game. But I found out that when I tried to play against real people on the internet, 98% of the time I would lose with that strategy, because that worked really well against a computer game, a programming, but it didn't work well against other people, because other people had strategies and they would change up their, if they saw what I was doing, then they knew a way to get past that or whatever. And I found that almost never worked, to the point where I just stopped playing online at all. I only played against players that I could beat, which were the computers. It was sad. But then the game wasn't very interesting anymore and eventually stopped playing. This kind of represents some of my character, whatever it is. I don't particularly think it's a healthy thing, but it's something to think about. And I think that one of the things that I realized about that is that that kind of a strategy works really well when you control all the variables. and you can have the perfect circumstances, but it doesn't work well in life, because in life you can't control all the circumstances, and you never have ideal situation. There's always some kind of obstacle that comes along, or life doesn't always, sometimes goes the way we want it to go, which is wonderful, but many times it doesn't. And in life, if we decide that we want to go for something, if we want to win in some way, or if we want to make some kind of a major change, there's always going to be a cost. There's always going to be an obstacle. There's always going to be a reason not to. This reminds me of this quote that I found like 5 or 6 years ago that I constantly think about. It's a Chinese proverb. It says, "The best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is now." A lot of times, we don't do the thing that we want to do because circumstances aren't really ideal for it. So we end up waiting, and we end up waiting, and we end up waiting. And sometimes a better situation comes along, better circumstances come along, and we can do that thing that we decided to do, we deferred doing, or we decided to wait to do. But sometimes they don't. Sometimes situations never get better. Sometimes situations get worse. And we find ourselves kind of in regret that maybe I should have started many years ago, even though it wasn't ideal at that time. Now, this isn't necessarily an excuse that we should live our life recklessly or carelessly or impulsively. It's good to be wise. It's good to be patient. It's good to try to make good plans and to try to do things properly. But it's just something that's important for us to consider, that life may not work in our favor that way. And even at the best, there's never going to be a time in our life where an important decision or important change that we need to make is not going to come at some cost or some risk. Maybe if we wait to quit our job because we're waiting to get the perfect new job, then we never end up quitting in the first place. If we wait for the perfect opportunity or the perfect circumstances to have that difficult conversation with a loved one, a family member, a friend, a child, a parent, and we wait for that perfect circumstances to come along, then those perfect circumstances may never come along. We may miss that opportunity. If you wait until you're completely ready to have children, internally and externally, the house, the money, everything, you may never find yourself actually feeling ready, and you may never end up doing it. Same with marriage. Many people find themselves in the situation today of being frozen by fear, because we know to some degree of the challenges that come with those monumental changes of life. And there's a temptation to wait until we feel ready. But I tell you, that day never comes. Maybe you're waiting before you have an abundance of money, before you start trying to be generous with it. Give some away, maybe tithing. And you think, well, if I just have a month where I have a bunch of extra money at the end of the month, then I'll be generous with it. And that day probably will never come. Whatever change you would like to see happen in your life, there will always be reasons not to do it. And beyond all those many practical things and family things, we also live in the realm of the Spirit, right? That's why we're all here. And God also may want things for your life and for my life and for our community, our church, our movement as a whole, that maybe we don't necessarily feel ready for. But it also doesn't mean that we shouldn't try. Maybe we have to try to do some things even if we're not ready or barely ready for them. We have to be open and sensitive to that God may want to do something that we're not completely ready for. But I also believe that God supports those who are courageous, that God supports those who kind of go out on a limb. This is Another quote from our founder, he said, "A wise person will place hope in the future and continue to move forward, no matter how difficult it may be. A foolish person, on the other hand, will throw away his future for the sake of immediate happiness." Okay, I didn't realize that was going to be a good one. It is a good one. This is similar to what's also said in Jeremiah in the Bible. It says, "This is what the Lord says, cursed is the man who trusts in man, the one who trusts in man, who draws strength from mere flesh, and whose heart turns away from the Lord. That person will be like a bush in the wastelands. They will not see prosperity when it comes. They will dwell in the parched places of the desert, in a salt land where no one lives. But blessed is the one who trusts in the Lord, whose confidence is in him. They will be like a tree planted by the water, that sends out its roots by the stream. It does not fear when heat comes. Its leaves are always green. It has no worries in a year of drought and never fails to bear fruit." So, for us, one of the things that we've been discussing recently is that we're coming up soon on our 20th anniversary of marriage and our 10th anniversary of pastoring pretty soon, just in about 11 months or so. And one of the things that we talked about doing a long time ago on our 10th anniversary of pastoring and 20th anniversary of marriage is that we really wanted to take an extended trip of some kind, take some time off, visit friends and family, maybe go on a little road trip, see some sites, some places in America that we've always wanted to see. So we're actually planning that. We're planning that this summer. We'll take a couple months off. You might call it a sabbatical. I don't know if there's a more appropriate word for it than that, but we were talking about this at the marriage course, because in the marriage course they really encourage you to have maybe some conversations that you've kind of been, putting off or not really inspired to want to dig into it. And one of the things was that, we were talking and Adonia was saying that, she really wanted to get excited about our trip and talk about all the fun things we're going to do and the people we're going to see. And I'm like, I can't even wrap my head around it, because for me, taking 2 months off, it's like I have to think about who's gonna buy the chickens for the potluck, who's gonna send out the emails, who's gonna get on the conference calls, who's gonna prepare the announcements, who's gonna buy the toilet paper and things. Because unfortunately these days I'm doing all those things, and delegation maybe isn't our strong suit or my strong suit. But the point is, there's like 100 things that we looked at that in order for us to take this trip and for me not to be working remotely, would have to happen, would have to be delegated, would have to be organized. And I told her, I can't even wrap my head around it, about having the fun and doing the enjoyable things, when I'm stressed about all the practical stuff that would need to happen in order for us to get there. So we talked about it and we're like, okay, let's do both. let's figure out, let's put a list of all the practical things that would need to happen, and let's figure out who we could potentially talk to about helping with these things, or what could be kind of done ahead of time before we leave. And then let's also just talk about who we'd like to visit and where we'd like to go and how we would do that. And it was really nice. We spent 2 hours talking about it yesterday, actually. And it would be tempting in some ways, kind of easier to just not go anywhere, not take a break. But that's something that we decided that we really wanted to do. It was something that's really important for us. And the reality is that for a lot of pastors, the 10 years is kind of a big deal. It's like a time when a lot of pastors actually get burnt out, because I think you do anything for 10 years and you look back and you're like, was that really worth it? Do I really like doing this? Is it worth the effort or the sacrifice or whatever? Whether it's your job or, I don't know. I think oftentimes happens with people in their jobs. Yeah, anything. But for some reason, 10 years is kind of it's a mile marker. That's a significant amount of time. And you got to really ask yourself, is this really worth it, So anyway, we decided that we really wanted to do it. But it's one of those things, thank you, Jerry, but it's really one of those things where when you decide to do something, you have to really ask yourself, how badly do you really want it? Is it really worth it? And if I don't do it, are things going to get better? Are things going to get easier? Are things going to be more ideal for me to be able to do this in the future? And the question is no. The answer is no. It won't get easier. But I am really looking forward to it in that sense that maybe this is the push we need to kind of make some changes, finally, after 10 years. But I'd also like for you to consider maybe something in your life that you've been putting off, or you've been avoiding, or you've been, you know there's a change needed there, but you also know that there's a lot of would be required to make the change, whether it's in your relationships, whether it's in your career, whether it's in your, personal life of faith. Maybe you're waiting for the circumstances to get better, for there to be less barriers or to be less risk involved. And I just want to encourage you, like I said, I'm not making this message to encourage you to be reckless or to do anything stupid. But at the same time, sometimes just waiting for situations to get better, for the economy to get better or whatever, it's just a waste of time. And it's better for you to just jump on whatever it is that you feel called to do and worry about sorting out the details later. So if there's something in your heart that's calling you in that way, this message was for you. And I hope you enjoyed it. And please join me in prayer. Dearest Heavenly Parent, thank you for this day. Thank you for all the brothers and sisters who came here to share together in this experience with one another and also with you. We pray always, Heavenly Parent, that you can feel invited and welcomed in this church and in this community and in each and every home of every single brother and sister here, Heavenly Parent. We know that we, each and every one of us, seek to have a real living relationship with you. We want you to be a part of our lives. We want to be in relationship with you. We want to serve you. We want to attend you. We want to be your good sons and daughters. And I just pray, Heavenly Parent, that as we come together in these times of Sunday service, that you can speak to our hearts and that you can lead us and guide us. And I offer this prayer in our names, bless Central Families. Amen and adieu. Thank you so much.